last 2 times I visited him before they made him incommunicado in March, and that happened a day after the US Southern Command military had a meeting in Quito with the new President Moreno, who wants Ecuador to be a colony.
Of where?
Colony
of where?
Of the United States.
Okay.
So in the 1980s, the United States, deeply anti-Catholic empire like the British Empire, were killing Catholics in Central America. That's just a preview of what they're going to do in South America now. Okay, then they got distracted killing Muslims in the Middle East, and while they were distracted, you had reform and progress in South America. You had what's called the pink tide. You had Lula in Brazil, who's now in prison. You had Chavez in Venezuela, who's now dead. So about 8 of those 10 countries, Chile and Colombia being the exceptions, had progress towards social justice and peace. And the Americans took their eye off the ball. Now they're there to do the rollback. They've mobilized the Colombian military to the Venezuela border. And they've had a meeting in Quito where they have to drop the case against Chevron and deliver the head of Julian Assange, just like John the Baptist said. So what's happening to Julian is a reflection of, something broader, and that's the US empire, which is in decline, attempting to take back South America. And Julian has never published anything that's untrue, never had to retract anything. If he is a genius, and he could easily have commodified his gifts that God gave him and be poolside in Silicon Valley reaping. But he has put his life and his liberty on the line because he's aligned himself to the people who suffer from the system by exposing the rich and powerful. And our response, we don't all have to go to jail. We don't all have to be in sensory deprivation for 6.5 years. But when one of our brothers and sisters is put in this situation, he's not the first, and he won't be the last. The British love internment. They turned Irish Catholics throughout the 70s, Italians and Germans during World War II. This is detention without charge. Now, if one of our brothers and sisters is taken like Julian is taken, we need to come up with solidarity, whether that's a 24/7 presence where they're detained, whether it's writing to them, whether it's speaking about them, whether it's writing their name on a wall. We've got to get out of Twitter. Twitter is a safety valve. It's a trap. It's like there's a big fight at the moment. It's very funny in this neighbourhood between Robbie Williams and Roger Plant. Now these are like the legitimate voices of dissent, Youth Rebellion, Led Zeppelin, and take that. And they're having a fight because Robbie wants to build an underground swimming pool in his mansion. And Robert Plant's upset by that. And now these are all safety valves, art, rock and roll. Twitter is an advance of that. So you can get on Twitter and you can posture and you can bully people anonymously without risking getting a smack in the face. And this is just a virtual reality. Being here, vigiling or writing a letter is physical, real reality. And we are now like the Matrix. People are having sex online. They're getting affirmation online. And the Twitter is based on the same psychology as poker machines, slot machines. I think Australia has 50% of the world's slot machines from memory. And that is a reinforcement. How many likes do you get? How many retweets? Now, people who don't have any friends and don't go out and socialise, they're getting their affirmation virtually. And that's, when I was growing up, and I grew up in we share a fence with Gallipoli Barracks, second biggest army base in Australia. My mother had 3 uncles who went to the Somme through that base. The Somme had nothing to do with defending Australia. Australia finds its security from serving empire, not by searching for peace and justice with the Aboriginal people. And when I was growing up, they're going off to Vietnam from there. Now they go to Syria from there. But all they ask of us, in Vietnam, they wanted conscription. All they ask from us now is to avert our gaze, to look the other way, not to hear the cries of the poor, not to see the massacres of the children of Yemen, not to see the connection to London because British Aerospace are providing the weapons to kill those children, and not to speak any truth to power. And as a radical Christian, I believe Jesus is here to heal our sight, our hearing, and our speech in a very symbolic, metaphorical way, that we can hear the cries of the poor, that we can see the shit that's going down, and we can speak some truth to power. Now, you don't have to be a Christian. You know, radical means, it's a Latin word, return to the roots. If you're a punk rocker, you need to go back to the original energy of punk. If you're a Muslim, I'm sure there's good things in there, and Buddhism. And, you know, if you believe in the pixies at the end of the garden, go for that, you know. And the other thing is, what sustains you in jail is your spirituality and your solidarity with your brothers and sisters. And that's what kept me going. They put me in a cage with 23 men in a room with 150 men. Those cage doors were open 16 hours a day for 9 months. I was the only white guy.
Political prisoners, or
no, they were the poor. They were. Most of them were what you'd call insurgent capitalists. They weren't born with the birthright to kill and thieve and deal. They're mostly Mexican peasants, you know, who were smuggling people across the border, or drugs, or there were people coming from gangs in LA who we were all being deported out of there.
And did it split demographically? Was it immediately?
Oh yeah, there were 500 Mexicans and 50 of us who weren't. So there was, and a lot of these Mexican guys would have been in state jails in America where they didn't have the numbers. So it was quite racially charged.
How did you cope with that as someone who doesn't care about race, or doesn't divide on racial?
The first month I was getting spat out a lot as low-level assaults. The guards were harassing me as well. And then my credibility built up literally by how much correspondence I got. I was playing football. There was one African team, 7 Mexican teams. So whenever we played, there'd be 400 Mexicans screaming racist abuse at us. Very atmospheric. And then I'd say, where am I? I'm here, like I'm on Hands Crescent now. It's a bit like jail here. Is that, okay, you're in a limited environment. There are good people everywhere. Let's find them. And I've found good people here. And how to be helpful to those people. You know, some people going through major drug withdrawal, or their families are splitting up, or someone had been killed, and you're listening, although that's not my strong suit. I asked my father how he got his broken nose, and he said I was talking when I should have been listening. But so you try and be helpful to others. So see, the poor, they can't afford a carpenter or electrician, so they have to do favours for each other. Kropotkin called that mutual aid. That's the basis of anarchism. The rich can afford to get anyone in, like some of these people get women in to service them sexually, rather than actually invest themselves in a relationship. So, you know, the rich need to be serviced at all times and all ways by the working poor. And some of those working poor have internalized the values of the system, and they create, and that's a lot of people you meet in jail are in there for thieving, dealing, or violence when they haven't been sanctioned by the state. The state sees itself as the sole arbiter of violence. Who they're threatened mostly by is other groups who think they have a mandate, whether that be the mafia or the IRA or Al-Qaeda, and pacifists who believe no one has the legitimate right to be violent. So that's, you know, in World War I in England, they interned Quakers, you know.
Many pacifists served in non-combatant roles as medics.
Well, radical pacifists wouldn't do that.
Okay.
You know,
is that
I think one of the Pink Floyd guys, I think that's the story, you'd have to check it out.
Yeah.
Father was a Quaker, joined the Communist Party. The Communist Party told him to go and serve in that role, and he was killed there.
Okay.
And he has a very strong anti-war position. So you know, we are deeply complicit by participating in this economy and the deaths of children in Yemen. Whether we like, you know, I'm a white Australian. I didn't choose to be born in Australia. I'm Irish culturally. That's my original sin. That's the reason I look the way I do. It's because I don't want to be mistaken for some kind of colonialist white boy who's here to benefit from the rape and pillage and destruction of Aboriginal society that's ongoing. We're coming up to Invasion Day on the 26th. And, you know, so repentance is about the change of heart and mind to get back to being a human being. And white boys in Australia especially need all the help they can get. They need to listen to Aboriginal people and women and gays and disabled people. But it's also, the race thing, the identity politics thing is bullshit, because Australia was built by white slavery. They were Irish, some of them were anti-imperialist, and EastEnders, Cockneys, and
If those white Australians looked deeper into their heritage and identified with their roots, whether it be Irish or there's a lot of Italians, I believe, as well, they might understand more the struggle of the Aboriginal people.
Yeah, I mean, we're a clueless generation. Like, you literally got young people walking into traffic looking at their phones, and we're supposed to feel sorry for them when they get run over. You know, like, people don't know who they are. Unless you've got a filter, whether it's a Catholic Irish filter or a punk rock filter or a feminist filter, you're just being shaped by this crap, you know. And what chance did this generation have? And you know, Gillette just put out an ad for the Me Too movement.
Toxic masculinity.
I mean, Me Too must be the most narcissistic, self-defeating, itemised name for a movement, you know. Like the Irish, Sinn Féin, in Irish it means ourselves alone.
Ourselves alone.
But at least there's a collective sense there.
Okay.
It's not me alone. It's you know, and it's a very whingy name. And this is the co-option of feminism. The invasion of Afghanistan, the killing of Afghan men, women and children was largely a feminist war. The Americans said, we're going to save the women of Afghanistan by bombing them. And we've had a lot of Christian wars, we've had a lot of Muslim wars, and we've had a lot of communist wars and capitalist wars, but this was a feminist war. And that's how it was sold. Now, the reason why young men and now women fight wars and why wars are fought are completely different. So some people might think they're fighting for Lawrence of Arabia. He was a illegitimate child, if that's not a contradiction in terms, born in Ireland, always wanted to be accepted. He went down to Arabia to fight for Arab autonomy, but what he was really fighting for was the balkanisation of the Ottoman Empire. And he came back and realised that and retired from public life and died very young. But he was used and exploited, like a lot of these Al-Qaeda boys. You know, they're told, you know, whatever story. Now, the people telling them, they don't believe this bullshit. All you need is a rank and file to believe it.
This is when the British thought Arab nationalism was a good thing because it could defeat the Ottoman Empire. But now Arab nationalism in the form of Saddam Hussein or Bashar al-Assad is a bad thing, and we'd rather have radical Islam topple the secular Arab Republic.
Yeah, that's been this case since the 50s. So what you had was Nasser, who believed in pan-Arab and we're one culture, one people, and these borders were all drawn up by Europeans, and so they saw that as a threat. So what they did is to get the Sauds to push Islamic identity over Arab identity.
So it was one or the other to defeat whichever one's top.
Yeah, they found Arab nationalism, and you know, Assad, Saddam, Gaddafi are the last expressions of Arab nationalism. And you see the thing about, you know, in Australia, when the Brits arrived and the Irish convicts, you had 200 languages, 200 cultures. Now, what homogenises people is industrialism. Take them off the land, put them in factories, put them in row houses.
Same language.
Now, the Arab world doesn't have a lot of industrialism, and so you had Gaddafi keeping all these disparate groups together, and Saddam and Assad. Now, the complaint about them is they weren't civil libertarians, which is correct. But who are you comparing it to? Are you comparing it to Saudi Arabia, now, who slice and dice journalists in their own embassy? Or you look around this society, people aren't using their civil liberties. You put an authoritarian in charge that allows them to shop, and the British will be happy. The Americans will be happy. The Australians will be happy. As long as we can shop. Because they think human freedom is a choice between Coke and Pepsi, Reebok and Nike. They don't expect any human freedom at school, at university, in their church. So what's replaced spirituality is consumerism for identity. So you get your identity out of supporting Manchester United, right? Now, Jose Mourinho just lives around the corner here, and I saw him, he walked by us the morning after he beat Manchester City, and he still didn't look like a happy man.
He's never happy.
And Robbie Williams, he doesn't sound happy either. And, you know, we need to liberate the rich from their excess. These young kids driving around in circles in their $500,000 sports cars, they're not happy.
But the rich are a victim of this system as well.
Yeah, it's obviously a much more comfortable victim to get involved in Yemen. But yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And I was once said about the Catholic worker movement that, you know, the main problem is the distribution of wealth. The Pope says 1 billion children are starving, right? And the amount of people, the waste on this street could probably feed a lot of them. And the Catholic worker, someone said, was the only movement he knew of that suggested resolving this problem by asking the rich to give up their excess, you know, rather than killing them or thieving from them.
Each the rich.
So maybe it just hasn't been tried. And, you know, they're not happy. They top themselves. They're addicted. You know, we've got a brothel just across the street here. Obviously, people coming from repressive societies and they're over here gambling and you know, doing sex and that and then they got, you know, like Alex Cox, who did Sid and Nancy, the movie, he's a friend of mine, and did Repo Man. He observed, he said, this is a short street and you've got burkas by day and high class prostitution at night. Now these are the contradictions, and these contradictions. Now, there's some things in life that are temporary, like lust, greed, it's all temporary. There's some things that are eternal. The truth is eternal. Julian Assange publishes the truth. Whether you have capitalism or communism or, you know, whoever's running the show, the truth will set you free and it's eternal. And the other stuff is just your status, your bank account. You can't take it with you, you know. What we're left behind is the truth. And Julian Assange really, it's a human being. He was born in 1971 in Townsville. Townsville's named after a racist slaver that kidnapped Kanaki Islanders to cut sugarcane in Queensland. Julian's born in a year where our state government, I was 11 when he was born, in Brisbane, and they suspended civil rights so a racially selected rugby team from South Africa could play a football match. That's where he comes from. He comes from a place. He's a human being. And it's a mistake to romanticise Julian. It's as racist to romanticise an Aboriginal person as it is to demonise them, or an Irish person. People are complicated. That's why people would rather be active around trees and dogs and stuff, because a dog will never let you down. A tree will never let you down. Human beings, we've got freedom. And we screw up, and even our small group, the Catholic worker, you know, I wouldn't say punctuality was a strong point, and you know, we have different gifts. Eric's going to build this house around me tonight. He's a carpenter. Another friend from Hungary is a techie. Another one, Joe's from Essex, a great singer. Pat from Brixton is very good at observing stuff, and Lise is a gardener and very resilient. Lived off mangoes in Thailand for 2 years. So people bring their own gifts, and the way I organise with no budget is I get people to do what they're already good at, and that reduces the stress. You know, obviously you seem to be pretty good at media, and so, you know, for me to do what you're doing would be really stressful. And
I really appreciate you taking the time to help me with this.
Thank you.
Look, congratulations on the 50th day. I think you just entered it.
Oh, really?
All the best carrying on the struggle, and I'm with you all the way.
Thank you.
I'm with you.
Good luck.
Ciaron, thank you very much. Thank you.